The auditorium was buzzing with soft murmurs as people took their seats. The wooden floors reflected the dim light, and the smell of polished wood mixed with faint hints of flowers arranged near the stage. Everyone was waiting for the music recital to begin, chatting quietly, adjusting their programs, and looking around as if expecting something special to happen. Among the performers waiting backstage, there was a young pianist who had always been shy and reserved, never one to seek attention. She was used to practicing alone in small rooms, her music flowing only for herself and a few family members who quietly encouraged her. That evening, she had been preparing a complex piece that had taken her months to perfect. Every note had been meticulously practiced, every pause carefully measured, every crescendo built to create an emotional journey. She imagined performing it flawlessly, her fingers moving like they had a life of their own, bringing the music to life. But now, in a sudden twist, she had been asked to play something simple instead. The request had come from the event coordinator, who explained that there had been a last-minute change in the schedule, and a different performer would handle the more complicated pieces. She was told, "Just pick something simple. The audience will enjoy it." The words were meant to be reassuring, but to her, they felt like a challenge and a slight disappointment. Backstage, she sat on a small bench, staring at the sheet music in front of her. The piece she had chosen was familiar, something she had learned a while ago, not particularly impressive, not something that would showcase the skills she had spent years developing. Her hands rested on her knees, and she took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous fluttering in her stomach. It wasn't fear of the audience. She had played in front of small groups before without much trouble. It was the thought that she would not be able to express herself fully, that her music might feel flat or dull compared to what she had planned. She closed her eyes and let her mind wander for a moment, thinking about the hours she had spent practicing, alone in her room, often losing track of time. She remembered the late nights when her fingers ached, the mornings when she woke up early just to get a few extra hours of practice, and the countless times she had made the same mistake over and over until it became perfect. Those moments were private, and they were hers, and yet, here she was, facing an audience that didn't know the depth of her preparation. She wondered if anyone would notice the subtle emotions that she could bring even to a simple piece, if anyone would feel the story she could tell with every note. Around her, other performers were getting ready too. Some were chatting excitedly with friends, sharing jokes and laughter, their confidence filling the small space with energy. She watched them, feeling a mixture of admiration and envy. They seemed so at ease, so natural, while she was caught in a swirl of uncertainty. But she reminded herself that she had her own way of connecting with music, a quiet, internal connection that was just as strong, even if it wasn't as showy. She glanced at the clock. It was almost her turn. Her heart began to beat faster, a steady rhythm that matched the nervous energy in her stomach. She took another deep breath, trying to focus on the keys she would soon touch. The piano was waiting on the stage, polished and shining under the soft lights, a silent partner ready to respond to every movement of her hands. She had spent countless hours imagining this moment, and now, even with the change in plans, she knew she had to give herself fully to the music. Walking toward the stage felt like stepping into a different world. The chatter of the audience faded as she approached, replaced by a quiet anticipation. She could hear the soft rustle of programs, the occasional cough, and the distant hum of people shifting in their seats. The piano seemed larger than usual, its black and white keys gleaming under the spotlight. She paused for a moment, letting her eyes sweep across the room, noting the rows of faces looking toward her. Some smiled encouragingly, others seemed curious, but all eyes were on her. The weight of their attention could have been overwhelming, but she tried to channel it into focus, reminding herself that every note she played would speak for her. She seated herself on the piano bench and adjusted it to the perfect height, her fingers hovering just above the keys. The simple piece she had chosen seemed almost like a familiar friend, its notes easy to find, its rhythm comforting. Yet, as she touched the first key, she realized that even a simple melody could carry emotion, could tell a story, could reach the hearts of those listening if played with sincerity. She drew a slow breath and let her hands move, letting the music flow naturally. In that moment, backstage memories and hours of practice converged. She remembered her teacher's words, always gentle but firm. Music is not just about playing the right notes. It's about making people feel something they didn't expect. Even the simplest melody can change a person's day if you put your heart into it. She thought about every small audience she had played for, the way they had paused and listened, the way a single note had sometimes brought a smile, a tear, or a quiet nod of understanding. She realized that tonight, even a simple piece had the potential to move people in ways she hadn't imagined. Her fingers pressed the keys, and the first notes filled the air. They were soft at first, tentative, almost questioning, like a gentle invitation. She could see some heads tilt slightly, eyes narrowing in focus, ears straining to catch the sound. The music began to grow, each phrase more confident, more expressive. She allowed herself to feel every note, to live in the melody, to let the rhythm guide her movements. She was not just performing. She was telling a story, one that didn't need complexity to be understood. As she played, the nervousness that had gripped her moments before began to melt away. Her mind emptied of self-doubt, replaced by concentration and presence. She noticed the subtle changes in the audience. The slight leaning forward of one listener, the soft closing of eyes by another, the gentle tapping of fingers in rhythm with the music. Even in its simplicity, the piece was connecting, speaking in a language that went beyond technique or virtuosity. By the time she reached the final notes, her heart was racing with exhilaration rather than fear. The melody lingered in the air, a soft echo that seemed to wrap around the room. There was a brief pause, a suspended silence as if the audience was holding its collective breath, processing what they had just heard. Then, slowly, the first clap came, followed by another and another, until the room was filled with applause. It was warm, genuine, and it wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. She rose from the bench, bowing slightly, still feeling the music within her, still riding the wave of emotion that had carried her through the performance. She could see the smiles on the faces of the audience, the sparkling eyes of children, the appreciative nods of older listeners. In that moment, she understood that it wasn't about playing something complicated or impressive. It was about being present, about letting the music breathe and letting it speak through her. Even a simple piece, played with sincerity and heart, could leave an unforgettable mark. As she walked off the stage, a mixture of relief, joy, and pride filled her. Backstage, the other performers looked at her with curiosity and admiration, some even whispering about how unexpectedly moving her performance had been. She smiled quietly to herself, still letting the music settle in her mind. She realized that this experience, this simple piece, had taught her something profound. That music was not a contest of skill, but a bridge between hearts, a language that anyone could understand if spoken with truth. Sitting down again, letting the applause wash over her in memory, she felt a sense of calm and accomplishment. She knew that she would remember this night for the rest of her life, not because of any complex notes or technical feats, but because she had allowed herself to connect with the audience in the purest way possible. The simple piece had become extraordinary, not because of the notes on the page, but because of the heart behind them. And for the first time, she felt a deep confidence that no matter what the future held, her music could always reach people, even when it seemed small and unassuming. Backstage, after her brief moment in the spotlight, she returned to the small room where other performers were waiting. The noise and chatter of the hallway felt distant, like a faint echo of a world she had just left behind. She took a deep breath and settled onto a chair, her fingers still tingling from the recent performance. The applause still seemed to echo in her ears, a gentle reminder of what had just happened. It was an unusual feeling, a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and an unfamiliar pride. She had played something simple as requested, and yet it had felt alive in a way she hadn't expected. Sitting there, she thought back to the moments before stepping onto the stage. The panic that had tried to rise in her chest, the self-doubt that whispered she wasn't ready, the fear that she might fail in front of so many eyes. All of it seemed to fade when her hands touched the keys. It was as if the music itself had taken over, guiding her fingers and filling the room with emotion. That memory alone made her heart warm, reminding her that the simplest melody could hold a profound power when played with sincerity. Around her, other performers were preparing, adjusting their instruments, tuning, or softly practicing their pieces. She observed them quietly, noticing the way some seemed calm while others fidgeted, brushing invisible dust off their music sheets or tapping their feet nervously. Each of them had their own story, their own challenges, their own small battles with nerves and self-doubt. It was comforting to realize that she wasn't alone in her worries, that everyone backstage carried a mix of anxiety and hope. The room felt alive with silent determination. Her mind drifted to her own journey with the piano. She remembered the first day she had touched the keys, unsure of what to do, pressing random notes and listening to the strange sounds that emerged. Her teacher had been patient, showing her the basics, encouraging her to explore. Slowly, the random notes began to form melodies, small ones at first, then longer, more complex pieces. She had spent years growing with the instrument, learning its nuances, feeling its rhythm resonate with her heart. Now, faced with performing something simple, she realized that all those years of dedication were not wasted. They had shaped the way she expressed herself, even in the most understated moments. Time passed quietly backstage, the anticipation of the next performance mingling with the afterglow of her own. She watched as performers came and went, the sound of distant music floating through the walls. Some were applause moments, others were soft practicing notes, the piano's voice echoing faintly through the room. She felt a sense of connection with them, even though they had not shared words. There was an unspoken bond among musicians, a recognition of the hours, the effort, the quiet dedication that led to these fleeting moments on stage. She picked up her sheet music again, not because she needed it, but because it comforted her. The notes were familiar, their black and white arrangement a map she had traveled many times before. She traced the lines with her fingers absent-mindedly, remembering the countless hours she had spent perfecting the pieces. It was strange to think that tonight, something simple had allowed her to reach a depth she hadn't expected. There was a lesson hidden in this experience, one that she wanted to understand fully. She thought about how often in life, people overlook the simple things, not realizing their potential to touch hearts, not realizing that sometimes simplicity is the purest form of expression. Her thoughts wandered to the audience. She imagined their faces as they had listened, some smiling, some captivated, some perhaps surprised by the emotion that a simple melody could carry. She wondered if they realized how much thought and heart had gone into every note. Did they feel the story she had tried to tell through her music? Could they sense the hours of practice, the quiet moments of struggle, the nights when she had doubted herself and yet continued to play? She didn't know, but the warmth of their applause suggested that, somehow, her message had reached them. As she reflected, a gentle calm settled over her. The initial nerves had transformed into a quiet confidence. She realized that performing wasn't just about impressing people or showing off skill. It was about sharing a part of herself, giving something personal and real to those willing to listen. Tonight, she had done that without needing complexity or grand gestures. The simple piece had become a bridge between her and the audience, a conduit for emotion and understanding. That thought made her chest swell with quiet satisfaction. She glanced around at the other performers and realized that many of them were watching the audience too, checking reactions, adjusting their expectations. She had been so focused on her own experience that she hadn't noticed how different everyone else handled the pressure. Some were meticulous, checking every note. Some were casual, relying on instinct and practice. Each approach had its own merits, but she felt that what mattered most was the honesty behind the performance, the willingness to give one's heart fully to the music. Minutes passed, and the next performer was called. She watched as they walked toward the stage, noticing the tension and excitement that mirrored what she had felt earlier. Backstage, everything seemed to slow down, a quiet pause between moments of action. She leaned back in her chair, letting her thoughts drift freely. She remembered the first time she had performed in front of anyone, how small and nervous she had felt, and how the audience had clapped and smiled. Those early experiences had laid the foundation for her understanding of music's power. And now, years later, she saw that foundation had grown stronger, deeper, more capable of reaching hearts in ways she had never imagined. Her attention returned to her own music, to the subtle details she had discovered while playing tonight. She realized that the pauses, the small hesitations, the gentle rise and fall of the notes, had all contributed to the effect. Even in simplicity there was nuance, there was expression, there was life. She thought about how easy it would have been to dismiss the piece, to assume it was too basic to matter. Yet, in the hands of someone willing to feel it fully, it had become meaningful, even powerful. This realization filled her with a quiet excitement, a curiosity to explore more ways that simplicity could be transformed by intention and heart. She picked up a small notebook she kept in her bag, filled with thoughts and observations about her practice and performances. Tonight's experience found its place on a fresh page. She wrote about the nerves she had felt, the unexpected warmth of the audience, the way the simple melody had connected with people in a way she hadn't predicted. Writing it down helped her understand the moment more clearly, helping her see the lessons she might carry forward. Every performance, she realized, was an opportunity to learn, not just for improvement, but for discovery, for understanding the magic of connection that music could create. As the evening continued, she continued to observe, not with envy, but with appreciation. She noticed the way other performers handled their nerves, the way they interacted with the audience, the subtle expressions on their faces as they played. There was a rhythm to the evening, a quiet ebb and flow, each performance adding a layer to the collective experience. She felt grateful to be part of it, to have a moment where she could express herself, and to witness the dedication of others striving to do the same. Backstage, in those quiet intervals, she felt a growing confidence. She realized that her music didn't need to be complex or flashy to have an impact. What mattered was the authenticity, the willingness to pour oneself into each note, to communicate through sound what words often could not. She felt a deep respect for the simplicity that had been requested, understanding that even a basic piece could reveal emotion, tell a story, and leave a lasting impression when approached with sincerity. Time moved forward, and soon the recital would end. She thought about her own performance again, letting the memory of the first notes, the soft melody, and the final chords fill her mind. The warmth of the audience's response, the gentle applause, the quiet admiration of those nearby, all of it became part of her experience. She understood now that music was not a measure of technical skill alone, but of connection, of shared feeling, and of courage to express oneself honestly, even when the spotlight felt intimidating. As the last performers played, she sat quietly, savoring the lessons of the evening. She knew that she would carry this experience forward, using it to inform her future practice, her future performances, and her understanding of what it meant to truly touch an audience. She realized that sometimes the simplest requests could lead to the most profound discoveries, and that every moment on stage, no matter how small or ordinary it seemed, held the potential for magic. The simple piece she had played was no longer just a melody. It was a reminder of the power of sincerity, focus, and the courage to let music speak from the heart. It was a memory she would return to often, a guiding light for her journey as a musician. The next day, she found herself thinking constantly about the performance. She had gone home, taken off her shoes, and sat quietly at the edge of her bed, still feeling the echo of the piano notes in her mind. She remembered the gentle murmur of the audience, the way their eyes had followed her hands, and the warmth of the applause. That night, she lay awake, replaying the performance over and over, noticing little things she had not focused on before. The subtle shifts in tempo she hadn't realized she made, the quiet pauses that seemed to catch the audience's attention, the softness in her own touch that gave the simple piece an unexpected depth. She realized that even the smallest decisions she had made in those moments had contributed to the overall impact. The morning brought with it a new kind of anticipation. She sat at her own piano in the corner of her room, fingers gently touching the keys, testing familiar melodies. She wanted to understand why the simple piece had resonated so deeply. It wasn't the technical skill, she realized, not just the flawless execution of notes, but the honesty behind each sound. She could feel the emotion travel from her fingers to the keys and then, somehow, reach beyond her room into an imaginary space where an audience listened, felt, and connected. It was a quiet revelation that left her both amazed and motivated. Her practice that day was different from any other. Normally, she focused on mastering difficult passages, correcting mistakes, and pushing herself to play faster, cleaner, and more technically perfect. But today, she let herself explore, experimenting with dynamics, slowing down, and speeding up in ways that felt natural, letting the music breathe. She played as if no one was watching, but with an awareness that someone somewhere could be feeling the subtle changes she made. The difference was clear. When she played with intention and feeling, even the simplest melody gained weight and presence. She smiled to herself, realizing that this was a lesson she would carry into every performance. Later, she walked through her neighborhood, letting her thoughts wander. She passed by the small park where she often sat with her sketchbook, noting the movements of trees in the wind, the soft laughter of children, and the distant sound of dogs barking. Music was in everything, she realized, in every small rhythm and pattern of life. She thought about the audience from last night, wondering what had gone through their minds as she played. Did they notice the quiet details? Did they feel the story she had tried to tell without words? She didn't know for sure, but she felt a growing confidence that her music could connect with people in a profound way, even when it seemed simple. That afternoon, she received a message from the event coordinator. It was brief, but it made her heart skip a beat. The note read that several people had asked about her performance, wanting to know more about her and her music. The coordinator mentioned that some audience members had been particularly moved by her playing and had expressed interest in hearing her perform again. She read the message slowly, letting the words sink in. A wave of mixed emotions washed over her: surprise, joy, and a touch of disbelief. She had never imagined that a simple piece could have such an effect. It was proof that the heart behind the music mattered far more than the complexity of the notes. She decided to visit the auditorium once more, even though the recital had ended. It was empty now, quiet, with only the faint scent of polished wood and a few stray chairs left where they had been pushed during the evening. She sat at the edge of the stage, looking at the grand piano that had seemed so daunting before. Its surface gleamed, and she could almost feel the memory of her fingers pressing its keys. She placed her hands gently on the keyboard, remembering the exact positions she had used, the feel of the smooth keys under her touch, and the way the notes had floated through the air. The room seemed to hum softly, as if the walls themselves remembered the music. She played the simple piece again, slowly, savoring every note, letting herself relive the connection she had felt with the audience. The experience was quiet, private, and yet deeply satisfying. As she practiced, she reflected on how she had approached the piece. She realized that her own doubts had been the biggest obstacle. Once she allowed herself to feel the music fully, to trust in her abilities, and to focus on sharing rather than impressing, the performance had come alive. She noted the importance of mindset, the quiet strength it took to believe in herself and her music. The lesson was clear. Even when asked to do something simple, she could create something extraordinary if she approached it with sincerity and presence. Later that week, she received an invitation to perform at a small community event. She was surprised and nervous, knowing that the audience would be different, that she would have to connect with people she did not know. But she felt a quiet determination. The experience of the simple piece had shown her that connection was possible, that music could bridge the gap between performer and listener in a way words could not. She accepted the invitation, knowing that it would be another opportunity to explore the power of simplicity. In the days leading up to the community event, she continued to experiment with her music. She explored how small changes in rhythm, volume, and timing could transform a melody. She discovered that even tiny shifts could create a sense of emotion, a feeling of movement, and a story that unfolded in real time. Each practice session became a journey of discovery, not just a rehearsal of notes. She learned to listen to herself more closely, to trust her instincts, and to play from a place of genuine feeling rather than technical perfection. The realization that simplicity could carry depth and meaning stayed with her, shaping the way she approached every piece of music. On the day of the community event, she arrived early, observing the setup, the arrangement of chairs, and the small stage that awaited her performance. The audience was smaller than the recital, but their presence was just as significant. She could feel their curiosity, their expectation, and the gentle energy that comes from people who are ready to listen. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of what she had learned. The power of music lies in its honesty and intention, not in its complexity. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage with calm confidence. The audience watched quietly, giving her a few moments to adjust before she began. She seated herself at the piano, placed her fingers on the keys, and let the first notes flow naturally. The melody was simple, familiar, yet each phrase carried the nuance and emotion she had discovered in recent days. She allowed herself to feel the music fully, to live in it, and to share that feeling with the audience. The effect was immediate. Heads turned, eyes focused, and a gentle hush settled over the room. She could sense the connection forming, the subtle acknowledgement that something meaningful was taking place. As she played, her mind wandered back to her first performance at the recital. She remembered the nervousness, the hesitation, and the eventual realization that simplicity could be powerful. Tonight, she carried that lesson with her, letting it guide her fingers and her heart. The audience responded not with grand gestures, but with quiet attentiveness, the kind of listening that allows music to be felt deeply. She noticed the small smiles, the relaxed posture, the way some listeners leaned slightly forward, and the sense of shared understanding that music could create. When the final note faded, there was a brief pause, a suspended moment where the audience absorbed the experience. Then, applause broke out, warm and sincere, filling the room with appreciation. She rose from the bench, bowing slightly, her heart filled with quiet joy. The moment was not about recognition or praise. It was about connection, about the shared experience of music and emotion. She felt grateful for the opportunity, for the lesson she had learned, and for the understanding that even the simplest piece, when played with authenticity, could create a lasting impact. After the event, she walked home slowly, replaying the performance in her mind. She thought about the audience, the quiet moments of attention, and the applause that had followed. She understood more clearly now that music was not just notes and technique. It was emotion, expression, and the courage to share oneself fully. The simple piece had become more than a melody. It was a reminder of the power of sincerity, the importance of intention, and the extraordinary potential hidden within simplicity. As she entered her home, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to continue her journey, knowing that every performance, no matter how simple, could touch hearts and leave a lasting impression. The day of the larger recital arrived, and the young pianist felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. Unlike her first simple performance, this audience was bigger, with faces she didn't know, expectations she could not gauge, and a space that seemed more imposing. She arrived early, giving herself time to observe the stage, the seating, and the overall atmosphere. The lights were bright, casting a warm glow over the polished piano, and the hush of preparation settled over the auditorium like a soft blanket. She knew this was another opportunity, another chance to test the lessons she had learned from her previous simple performances. Backstage, she took a quiet corner to prepare, stretching her fingers gently and letting her mind focus. The other performers were busy with their own routines, some pacing, others quietly humming their pieces. The hum of activity around her contrasted with the calm she was trying to cultivate within herself. She reminded herself that connection mattered more than perfection, that the heart behind the music could speak louder than any technical skill. With each breath, she felt a little more centered, more ready to step into the spotlight once again. As she waited for her turn, she thought back to the moments of her first simple performance and the community event that followed. She remembered the subtle power of emotion in the music, how even the smallest gestures had impacted the listeners, and how sincerity had transformed her playing. Those memories became her guide, a quiet reassurance that she could trust in her own abilities, that her music could reach hearts even without complex flourishes. It was a lesson she had embraced fully, and tonight she would carry it with her again. When the call came for her to perform, she walked toward the stage with measured steps, the wooden floor creaking softly under her shoes. She felt the presence of the audience as she stepped into the light, a gentle wave of anticipation washing over her. The piano awaited, gleaming under the warm spotlight, its keys promising both challenge and comfort. She seated herself, adjusted the bench, and rested her hands lightly on the keys. For a moment, everything felt still, as if the world had paused to give her space to play. The first notes she struck were deliberate and soft, like an invitation. The melody was simple, chosen specifically to allow the audience to feel the emotion within each phrase. As her fingers moved, she allowed herself to fully experience the music, letting her mind and heart guide every motion. The sound filled the auditorium, wrapping around each listener, drawing their attention, and quietly commanding their focus. She could see subtle reactions, a leaning forward, a softened expression, a hand resting gently on a cheek. The audience was attentive, caught in the quiet intimacy of her performance. With every note, she poured more of herself into the music. The simplicity of the piece allowed her to explore nuance, to emphasize the rises and falls, the pauses, and the gentle shifts in tempo. She realized that the audience was responding not to technical complexity, but to the story she was telling through sound. Each measure became a conversation, each chord a subtle gesture of emotion. The auditorium seemed to breathe with her, each listener participating in the shared experience in their own way, whether consciously or unconsciously. Midway through the piece, she noticed a few faces in the front row, eyes wide, absorbing every note. It was a mixture of surprise and admiration, as though they had not expected such depth from a simple melody. She allowed herself a quiet smile, realizing that the power of music was not diminished by simplicity. It was enhanced by the honesty and intention behind it. Her hands moved with growing confidence, guided by the rhythm and emotion she felt within, creating a dynamic flow that was subtle yet compelling. The audience was no longer just watching. They were listening, feeling, and becoming part of the story she conveyed. As she reached the final passages, the music swelled slightly, filling the room with warmth and presence. She allowed a few lingering notes to resonate fully, letting the sound hang in the air, like a gentle echo of the emotion she had invested. The audience remained quiet, absorbed in the fading melody, and for a moment, she felt as though time itself had paused, holding the space for this shared connection. It was a rare and powerful experience, one that left her both exhilarated and humbled. When the last note finally faded, a soft silence filled the auditorium. It was a silence of appreciation, of processing, of lingering awe. Then, gradually, applause began to rise, gentle at first, then growing stronger, enveloping her in warmth and recognition. She rose from the bench, bowing slightly, feeling a mixture of pride, relief, and quiet joy. The reaction was not just for her skill, but for the emotion and honesty she had shared. She had communicated something real, something meaningful, and the audience had responded with the most sincere form of gratitude. Their attention and their applause. Stepping away from the piano, she allowed herself a moment to breathe, letting the emotions of the performance settle in. Backstage, other performers looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. Some whispered quietly about the unexpected impact of her simple piece. Others nodded in recognition of the effort and emotion required to reach such an audience. She felt a quiet connection with them, understanding that each of them had their own challenges and victories, and that tonight she had experienced a small but significant triumph. As the evening continued, she watched the remaining performers, now seeing each performance through a new lens. She noticed the subtle ways music could influence mood, the gentle shifts in audience attention, and the moments when a single note could capture a listener's full focus. Her own experience had given her insight, helping her understand not just the technical aspects of playing, but the emotional resonance that could be achieved through intention and presence. The auditorium, once intimidating, now felt like a space of possibility, a canvas for expression where every musician could find their voice. Later, after the recital had ended, she sat alone for a while in the empty auditorium. The seats were quiet, the lights dimmed, and the echoes of her performance still lingered in the air. She placed her hands on the keys, not to play, but to feel the connection again, to remember the way the notes had moved through her and the audience. Each touch brought back the memory of the shared experience, the quiet understanding that music was more than just sound. It was a bridge between hearts, a medium for emotion, and a reminder of the power of honesty and presence. She reflected on how far she had come, from the initial nervousness before her first simple performance to the confident, expressive playing she had demonstrated tonight. She understood now that technical skill was important, but it was not the defining factor of a meaningful performance. The heart behind the music, the intention to connect, and the courage to express oneself fully were what truly mattered. The simple piece had become a testament to these truths, a reminder that even the most unassuming melodies could leave a lasting impression when played with sincerity. Walking home that night, she thought about the audience, the quiet attentiveness, the applause, and the subtle reactions she had noticed. She felt grateful for the experience, for the opportunity to connect with others through music, and for the lesson that simplicity could be transformative. She realized that each performance, regardless of its complexity, held the potential for impact if approached with intention and honesty. The simple piece was no longer just a melody. It was a symbol of growth, understanding, and the extraordinary potential hidden within everyday opportunities. At home, she sat by her own piano, reflecting on the evening and the journey that had led her to this point. She thought about the nervous moments, the lessons learned from previous performances, and the quiet triumph of connecting with an audience in a meaningful way. She understood that her journey as a musician was ongoing, that every note she played carried the possibility of reaching someone, of touching a heart, of creating a shared experience. The simple piece had revealed this truth, and she knew that it would guide her in every performance to come. As she placed her fingers on the keys, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She began to play, not for an audience, not for applause, but for the sheer joy of expression and the quiet power of music. Each note resonated with the lessons she had learned, that honesty mattered, that connection was key, and that even the simplest melodies could create something extraordinary when approached with heart. The sound filled the room, carrying the echoes of the recital, the community event, and the private moments of reflection. She knew that this was just the beginning, that her journey with music would continue, guided by the understanding that simplicity, sincerity, and presence could transform every performance into something unforgettable. The following morning, she woke up with a sense of calm and excitement that she had never felt before a performance. The experiences of the past days, the small recital, the community event, the larger audience, had given her a new understanding of what it meant to share music. She knew that tonight, she would face another audience, one she had never performed for before, and she felt ready, confident in the lessons she had learned and the growth she had achieved. She spent the day quietly preparing, not just practicing, but reflecting. She played the simple piece repeatedly, experimenting with subtle variations, letting her fingers explore the keys while her mind focused on feeling rather than perfection. Each note, each chord, each pause became a small opportunity to connect, to communicate a story without words. She realized that the joy of music was not in impressing others, but in the honest expression of her emotions and the ability to let listeners feel what she felt. It was a lesson she had discovered gradually, through patience, experience, and careful attention to the quiet power of simplicity. As evening approached, she arrived at the venue, a familiar sense of anticipation mixed with curiosity. The space was larger than any she had played in before, and the audience was gathering steadily. She observed quietly, noting the faces, the subtle movements, the expectant expressions. Some were children, wide-eyed and eager. Others were adults, attentive and quietly waiting. She felt the same nervous energy she had once experienced, but it was tempered now by a calm understanding. She knew that her connection with the music, with the audience, and with herself was stronger than any fear she might feel. Backstage, she found a quiet corner to settle. The hum of conversation, the soft rustle of programs, and the occasional footsteps of other performers created a rhythm around her. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and recalled the moments from her first simple performance, the community event, and the larger recital. Each had contributed to her growth. Each had taught her something valuable about music, emotion, and presence. She felt grateful for the journey, for the lessons, and for the confidence she now carried. When her turn came, she walked toward the stage with measured steps, aware of the audience but not overwhelmed. The lights were warm, the piano gleamed under the glow, and she took a moment to feel the space, to let the room settle around her. She seated herself, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, there was silence, a shared breath between performer and audience. Then, softly, she began to play. The first notes were gentle, careful, an invitation into the melody. She allowed herself to feel the music, letting her hands move naturally, guided by emotion and memory. The audience leaned in, attentive, listening closely. She noticed the subtle reactions. A nod, a smile, a soft inhale of appreciation. The music seemed to flow beyond the room, carrying with it her emotions, her thoughts, and the honesty she had discovered through countless hours of practice and reflection. It was not the complexity of the notes, but the depth of feeling behind them that captured attention. As the piece progressed, she explored dynamics and rhythm with intention. She allowed pauses to resonate, highlighting the emotion behind each phrase. She varied the volume subtly, letting crescendos and decrescendos enhance the narrative she was telling. The audience was silent, absorbed in the simple melody that had transformed into something far more profound through her interpretation. Faces reflected surprise, admiration, and quiet appreciation, a testament to the power of music to communicate without words. Midway, she found herself fully immersed in the performance. Her hands moved with confidence, guided by instinct and emotion. She no longer noticed the audience individually, only the shared energy and the way the room responded to each note. She realized that every performance, no matter how simple or complex, held the potential to move people if approached with sincerity. Tonight, that lesson was alive in every chord, every pause, every gentle rise and fall of the melody. As she neared the final passages, she allowed the music to swell slightly, not through speed or technical flourish, but through the depth of feeling she poured into it. She emphasized the story within the notes, letting her interpretation shine through. The audience responded intuitively, their attention unwavering, their connection palpable. Each sound became a bridge, linking her emotions with those of the listeners, creating a shared experience that was quiet yet profound. She felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before, the knowledge that her music had reached others in a meaningful way. The last notes lingered, softly fading into the air. The room was silent for a heartbeat, a moment of suspension where the audience seemed to hold onto the final echoes of the melody. Then, applause erupted, warm and genuine, filling the space with energy and appreciation. She rose from the bench, bowing slightly, feeling a mixture of pride, relief, and deep gratitude. It was not recognition she sought, but connection, and she had achieved it in the simplest yet most profound way. Backstage, performers and audience members alike whispered quietly about the unexpected impact of the simple piece. Some admired her ability to transform simplicity into emotion, while others expressed curiosity and a desire to hear more. She smiled quietly to herself, recognizing that the lessons of sincerity, presence, and honest expression had guided her to this moment. She understood now that complexity was not required to touch hearts. Authenticity and intention were the true keys to meaningful performance. Later, she walked home slowly, savoring the memories of the evening. She thought about the audience, the quiet attentiveness, and the moments of subtle connection she had witnessed. She reflected on how far she had come, from nervous beginnings to confident expression, and how much she had learned about the power of music to communicate and connect. The simple piece, once thought unremarkable, had become a symbol of growth, courage, and the extraordinary potential hidden within honesty and simplicity. At home, she returned to her own piano, sitting quietly as she placed her fingers on the keys. She played again, not for an audience, but for herself, letting the music flow naturally, feeling the resonance of each note. She remembered the lessons of the past performances, that music was more than technique, more than skill. It was emotion, story, and connection. Every note carried the possibility of impact, every melody the chance to touch a heart. She felt grateful for the journey, for the understanding she had gained, and for the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had shared something meaningful. As she played, she thought about the future, about the performances yet to come, and about the audiences she would reach. She understood now that even the simplest music could carry extraordinary weight when approached with sincerity and presence. Each performance was an opportunity, each note a chance to connect, and each moment on stage a reminder of the beauty of honest expression. The journey had begun with a simple request, but it had led to profound discovery, personal growth, and the realization that music, at its core, was a bridge between hearts. The young pianist continued to play into the quiet night, savoring the sound of the piano and the lessons it had taught her. The simple piece had become more than a melody. It was a testament to the power of authenticity, the importance of presence, and the extraordinary potential that lies within every performance. She understood now that music was not about impressing others, but about sharing a part of oneself, allowing emotion and honesty to guide every note. And in that understanding, she found peace, fulfillment, and the inspiration to continue her journey as a musician, knowing that every melody, no matter how simple, had the power to touch hearts and create lasting connections.